Her hands were still shaking when the phone rang at 7 in the morning.
Hello?
And Azélie Moreau knew with absolute certainty that the voice on the other end would either kill her or claim her, and honestly she wasn't sure which was worse. 12 hours ago she'd been nobody, unseen, just another Haitian interpreter grinding through Seoul's political machinery. Then she'd heard 6 words in English through a cracked office door. "The journalist is handled, we're clear," and everything had splintered like glass. But let's rewind, because you need to understand exactly how we got here. It was 11:43 on a Thursday night, and Azélie was the last translator, still hunched over her desk in the campaign headquarters, converting diplomatic briefings from English to Korean, her fingers stiffening around a red pen. 3 years in Seoul had sharpened her language skills to a lethal edge, but it had also drilled in the survival rules: keep your head down, do excellent work, collect your paycheck, send 80% home to Port-au-Prince, where her mother was raising 3 kids on a teacher's salary, and for the love of God, don't touch Korean politics beyond your pay grade. She gathered her translations, stretched until her spine cracked, and headed for the elevator. Shim Tae-gyom's office was on the 15th floor, and she'd been instructed to leave urgent materials on his desk, regardless of the hour. The man was running for president, leading in the polls by 8 points, the anti-corruption candidate who promised transparency and justice, and apparently that meant his interpreters worked until midnight. The top-floor hallway was dark, except for a blade of light beneath his office door. She approached on quiet feet, translations pressed against her chest, and lifted her hand to knock. Then she heard it. English. Tae-gyom was speaking English on the phone, which was unusual because he typically used Korean for private calls, but his English was Oxford, perfect, smooth as expensive liquor, and it carried through the door that someone had left cracked open maybe an inch. "The journalist is handled," he said, calm, as if confirming a dinner reservation. "Yeojun took care of it this morning, made it look like a traffic accident. Hit and run. Very tragic. Very clean. We're clear." The documents slipped from Azélie's hands. Not far, maybe 6 inches, but they struck the carpet with a whisper that sounded like a gunshot in the silent hallway, and her brain started screaming because the journalist could only mean one person. Rebecca Chen, Canadian, 34 years old, investigative reporter for the International Labor Rights Consortium. She'd been at campaign headquarters last week, and Azélie had interpreted for her during a press conference where Chen had asked razor-sharp questions about worker deaths at construction sites tied to campaign donors. 2 days ago, Rebecca Chen had been killed in Gangnam. Hit and run, driver never found. The news had called it a tragic accident. Except it wasn't an accident. It was murder. And Azélie had just heard a presidential candidate admit to ordering it. In the window's reflection behind Tae-gyom's head, she could see him at his desk, phone pressed to his ear, and then he turned slightly and their eyes met in the glass. Time stopped. His expression didn't change, no surprise or anger or fear, just a faint tilt of his head like he'd noticed something mildly interesting, a bug under a microscope perhaps, something small and already doomed. He finished his phone call with genial remarks about golf next week, set the phone down with deliberate care, and turned to face her fully through. "Miss Moreau," he said, and his voice carried that warm timbre he used in campaign speeches, the tone that had earned him a 72% approval rating. "Working late again. Your dedication is truly admirable." Every survival instinct Azélie possessed screamed, "Run!" But her body had turned to stone, muscles seized, and the rational part of her brain was doing ruthless arithmetic. 28 years old, foreign worker, visa sponsored by this campaign, 200,000 won in her bank account, which converted to maybe 170 American dollars. No powerful connections. No family in Korea. No embassy that cared about Haitian nationals beyond rubber stamp paperwork. And now knowledge that could destroy a presidential candidate burning in her skull like a live grenade. She was comprehensively, spectacularly, apocalyptically doomed. "I brought the translations, sir," she heard herself say. And thank God her voice came out level, because Haitian mothers raised daughters who knew how to bury terror beneath flawless manners, who understood that survival sometimes meant smiling while your heart tried to claw through your ribcage. "Thank you," he said, handing her the last page. And when their fingers touched his were warm, steady, the hands of a man who had never shaken in his life. "You understand English very well, don't you?" Not a question. A statement of fact. "Yes, sir. It's required for the position." Not just the vocabulary, but the nuance, the implications, the context. He stood smoothly and offered his hand to help her up, and refusing would be an admission that she'd heard something, understood something, so she took it and let him pull her to her feet. "That's a rare and valuable skill, Azélie. May I call you Azélie?" The use of her first name felt like a leash snapping around her throat. "Of course, sir." They were standing too close now, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, and those eyes were kind. Unmistakably kind, creased at the corners with warmth, the eyes of someone who volunteered at orphanages and remembered staff birthdays. Which made everything infinitely worse, because monsters were supposed to look monstrous, weren't they? They weren't supposed to look like the hero of their own immaculate story. "Go home and get some rest," he said softly, almost fatherly. "We'll talk tomorrow morning. I think we have some things to discuss." She left because staying meant talking, and talking meant naming what she'd heard. And the elevator ride down 15 floors took approximately 7,000 years, while her mind cycled through increasingly frantic options. Max out the credit cards she didn't have, and fly somewhere, tonight, anywhere, maybe back to Haiti, except then what? Live half vanished? Go to the police and report what she'd heard? Trust they cared more about justice than political favors? Trust they wouldn't just call Tae-gyom's office to confirm? Contact the Canadian embassy about their dead journalist? Become a witness? Pray that witness protection extended to foreign nationals with fragile visas? Every path ended with her dead or deported or both, and she couldn't decide which outcome terrified her more. Seoul's night air slammed into her when she exited the building, summer humidity thick enough to swallow breath. Streets still alive with bodies, even at midnight, because this city never slept, and apparently neither did fear. She walked 14 blocks before her hands steadied enough to flag a taxi, and the driver happily dissected the upcoming election in Korean. Wasn't Shim Tae-gyom wonderful? Finally, an honest politician who'd cleansed the corruption, and Azélie murmured agreement, while staring at her reflection in the window and wondering if this was the last unbroken moment of her life. Her apartment in Nawon-gu had never felt smaller or sadder. Studio, maybe 400 square feet. Hot water that worked 3 days out of 7 if fortune smiled. A refrigerator that hummed like it was bargaining with death. Rent that still devoured a third of her salary despite the place being undeniably awful. She sat on the floor with her back against the wall and pulled out her phone. Real phone, not work phone. And stared at her last text exchange with her mother. "The kids need school fees by next week," her mother had written 3 days ago. "Mikhail's teacher says he's so smart, maybe scholarship material if we can keep him in good school. Your sister would be so proud." Her dead sister, the one who died in childbirth 4 years ago, leaving 3 infants and a mother too old to start over but doing it anyway because that's what you did. You endured. You carried on. And Azélie sent money every month, 80% of everything she made, because those children deserved more than she'd been given. Deserved classrooms and full plates and a future. But now she held knowledge that powerful men needed buried, and powerful men didn't allow loose ends to keep breathing, did they? She didn't sleep, just sat there watching the hours crawl across her phone. 2 in the morning, 3, 4, pale dawn leaking through thin curtains. Every passing car making her heart jolt. Every distant siren sharpening into threat. At 7:15, her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize, and her hand shook so badly she nearly dropped it. "Miss Moreau, this is Choi Min-jun from Human Resources." The voice was professionally pleasant, almost bored. Like this call sat between coffee orders and scheduling meetings. Mr. Shim would like to see you in his office at 9 o'clock this morning. Please be punctual. The line went dead before she could ask why, before she could bargain or cry or say anything remotely useful. Azali showered on autopilot, muscle memory carrying her through while her thoughts ran in panicked circles, and dressed in her most conservative suit, navy blue, bought secondhand but still respectable, the kind of outfit that said, I am harmless. I blend in. Please don't notice me long enough to hurt me. She started an email to her mother if something happens to me, if I disappear, but she stopped halfway through because what was the point? Her mother couldn't do anything from Port-au-Prince, couldn't shield her, could only worry and mourn. The campaign office looked disturbingly normal in daylight, packed with young staffers moving in controlled frenzy, interns balancing coffee trays, senior aides snapping into phones, everyone buoyed by poll numbers showing their candidate steamrolling the opposition. Banners everywhere screamed 53 days until change in both Korean and English, 53 days until the election, 53 days until Shim Tae-gyum almost certainly became the next president of South Korea. The man who arranged deaths for people who asked the wrong questions. Yo-jun met her at the 15th floor elevator, and he looked terrible, which would have been almost funny if anything still registered as funny. 38 years old, but aging badly, like stress had curdled him, with the permanently depleted look of a campaign chief of staff. Except today the exhaustion was laced with something sharper. Guilt, maybe. Fear, definitely. His eyes flicked to her face, and away, back again and gone, and his hands kept clenching and unclenching at his sides like he was throttling an invisible throat. Miss Moreau, right on time. Good. Very good. His voice wobbled despite the words. Mr. Shim is expecting you. The fact that he was rattled made everything worse, because rattled people slipped, and slips got people killed. And as Ali was starting to understand, she was standing in a minefield without knowing where the pressure points were. Tae-gyum's office had floor-to-ceiling windows, framing Gangnam in a way that probably cost more per month than Azali had earned in 3 years of living carefully. He sat behind his wide desk reading something, wire-rimmed glasses perched low on his nose, morning sunlight catching the silver in his hair and making it glow. And when she stepped inside, he looked up and smiled like her presence genuinely pleased him. Azali, please, sit down. Coffee? Tea? You look exhausted. Did you sleep at all? I'm fine, thank you, sir. No, you're not fine. Let's not pretend otherwise. He removed his glasses and folded them with deliberate care, the measured precision of a man who never acted without intent. You're frightened. Which makes sense, considering what you overheard last night. So let's spare ourselves the theater. I've always believed in honesty, radical honesty. And this situation calls for it, don't you think? The laugh that escaped Azali's throat was high and sharp, borderline hysterical. Honesty. You want to talk about honesty? Yes, I do. He leaned back in his leather chair and steepled his fingers, studying her with those warm, reassuring eyes that had convinced millions he was their deliverance. So let me be entirely transparent with you. You heard something last night that you were never meant to hear. You now carry information capable of ending my campaign, erasing my political future, possibly dismantling my life as it exists. If I put myself in your position, sitting exactly where you are now, I imagine you spent the night wondering if you were safe, if you'd leave this building alive, if an unfortunate accident awaited you, similar to what befell the unfortunate Miss Chen. He said it plainly. No euphemisms, no shadows, just facts, delivered the way one might discuss budget projections or tomorrow's weather. Before we go on, a quick pause. If you're this far into the story, it means it's doing its job. You're here because something about power, survival, and impossible choices pulled you in. If you want stories like this to keep finding their way to you, engagement is how that happens. A subscription, a like, a comment, that's what keeps work like this visible instead of buried. So if this story is landing for you, take a second and mark it. Then we'll keep going. Azali's mouth was desert dry, her tongue glued to her teeth. So what happens now? She whispered. Tae-gyom rose and crossed to the window, hands folded behind his back like a lecturer settling into familiar material. Here's what won't happen. You won't be harmed. You won't be threatened, at least not overtly. You won't suffer any accidents, because that would be catastrophically foolish. And I did not claw my way to the brink of the presidency by being foolish. He turned, Seoul's skyline framing him. You've worked here 8 months. Dependable, punctual, excellent output. If something happened to you now, right after late hours near my private office, people would ask questions. And I loathe questions, Azali. Questions create risk. Then what do you want from me? I spent a good portion of this morning awake. Sleep was elusive. Reviewing your employment file. He began pacing, unhurried. You send 80% of your salary to Haiti every month. Supporting a mother raising your late sister's 3 children on a teacher's income that barely stretches to food and school fees. Commendable. Self-denying. Almost heroic. Your work visa expires in exactly 4 months, and renewal is uncertain, given the administration's growing hostility toward foreign workers, especially those from, as the memo phrased it, economically non-contributing nations. Each sentence landed with surgical precision. He'd done the homework. He knew precisely where she could break. You have no debt, no criminal record, glowing references from every employer you've ever had. You're exactly the kind of person who understands that surviving in this world sometimes means choosing between bad options and worse ones. He returned to his desk and poured tea from an expensive ceramic pot, movement smooth, almost reverent. Steam curled upward between them like a warning neither of them named. So, here's my proposal. A promotion, personal interpreter, reporting directly to me and no one else. You'll attend every campaign event, every diplomatic meeting, every international press conference. Complete access to my schedule and my circles. Your salary triples. I will personally secure a 3-year work visa extension, with a path toward permanent residency. And there's an apartment in Gangnam, fully furnished, utilities covered, included as part of your compensation. The building has excellent security, 24-hour concierge, everything you'd expect. The figures exploded in Azali's head. 3 times her salary meant, she calculated wildly, a complete rewrite of her family's life. Her nephew could finally get the surgery he'd waited 2 years for. Her mother could leave the crumbling school with the leaking roof and blackened corners. The children could attend schools with libraries and trained teachers. A 3-year visa meant safety, predictability, the luxury of thinking beyond next month's rent and groceries. All it required was silence in service of a man who ordered people erased. People talk when they're far away, Tae-gyom went on, his voice lowering, softening. When they feel powerless, excluded, forgotten, that's when conscience becomes noisy. That's when they call prosecutors, journalists, foreign embassies. Fear and guilt grow best in isolation. But people who are close, who are trusted, who belong to the family? He placed a cup of tea before her, jasmine-scented, fragile, and outrageously costly. They understand protection is mutual. I protect those loyal to me, Azali. I am extremely, relentlessly good at protecting my people. The tea steamed between them. She let it cool untouched. And if I say no? She asked, startled that her voice still existed. Then you say no, and I honor it. I'm not a monster, despite what you may believe right now. His smile carried a hint of regret, almost sincerity. You remain in your current role until your visa expires in 4 months. Then you return to Haiti. No harm, no accidents, no sudden illnesses. You have my word. But Azali, opportunities like this are singular. Tripling your income would permanently alter your family's future. Your mother could rest. Those children could dream bigger than survival. University, perhaps. Possibilities you never had. You could build something durable. He was skilled, exceptionally so, turning murder into math, coercion into care, silence into filial duty, the offer framed as benevolence rather than threat. Rebecca Chen wasn't merely a reporter doing her job, Tae-gyom continued, adopting that calm, instructive tone. Her investigation would have destroyed thousands of livelihoods. Those construction sites employ people, Azali. They feed families, pay school fees, sustain whole communities. Yes, accidents happened, tragic ones. And yes, safety standards must improve, I agree entirely. But shutting everything down would have devastated working-class families already hanging by threads. Leadership sometimes demands unbearable choices for the greater good. Utilitarian reasoning. The many weighed against the one. I'm not asking you to approve of what occurred. I'm asking you to accept that morality is rarely clean. He was rationalizing murder as policy, cloaking it in theory and public good, and the most frightening part was how sincerely he believed it. She stared at the tea cooling in its delicate, expensive cup, stared at the man who had killed before and would kill again, and had somehow arranged his conscience so he remained the hero of his own story. Stared at her reflection in the window behind him, small and dark and foreign and lacking power in every way that counted. The sensible choice was obvious, had always been obvious. Take the money, take the apartment, take the promotion, keep her mouth closed and her family alive. Survival was never clean or admirable. Survival was bargaining and bending and learning how to live with choices you couldn't look at too closely. I don't need time to think, Azali heard herself say, her voice distant, disembodied. I accept your offer. Tae-gyom's smile spread across his face, genuine pleasure brightening him from the inside. Excellent, truly excellent. I knew you were intelligent. Welcome to the team. When she left his office, her legs barely held her up, and Yeojun stood waiting in the hallway, studying her with an expression that might have been pity or might have been relief that no further violence was required. Congratulations on your promotion, he said, voice hollow. Human resources will process everything immediately. As he walked away, Azali noticed his hands were shaking badly enough that he shoved them into his pockets. The apartment was obscene. There was no softer word. 22nd floor of a Gangnam building, where lobby security wore suits finer than anything she had ever owned. 2 full bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, framing Seoul like a postcard designed to remind you how small you were. A kitchen filled with unfamiliar appliances, marble counters, a bathroom with a tub large enough to disappear inside. The monthly rent alone likely exceeded everything she'd earned in 3 years. A welcome basket waited on the kitchen island, stuffed with imported teas, French chocolates, and a bottle of wine, whose label suggested it cost more than her old apartment's yearly rent. The card, written in elegant script on thick cream paper, read, "To new beginnings and a long partnership. Looking forward to working closely together. T.G." She stood in the middle of all that purchased luxury and felt the cage door slam shut and bolt. The first week was pure saturation, a plunge straight into heat and depth. Azali was with Tae-gyom 16 hours a day at minimum, sometimes 18, sometimes time just blurred. Morning briefings at 6 where she translated international headlines while he ate breakfast and marked pages in red pen. Diplomatic meetings with trade delegations where she converted dense economic policy into 3 languages without losing a shade of meaning. Press conferences where foreign journalists fired sharp questions she reshaped into flawless Korean. Fundraising dinners where she stood just behind his left shoulder, unseen and indispensable, a polished, multilingual extension of his image. He was never inappropriate in any way she could name or document, never touched her beyond professional necessity, a hand at her elbow through crowds, fingers brushing when papers were passed. Once his palm at her lower back when a photographer wanted the candidate framed with his diverse international team, but his attention never left. It was constant, enclosing, impossible to escape. He remembered everything, how she drank her coffee, 2 sugars, no cream, and it appeared that way each morning without a word. That she was allergic to shellfish, discovered when she declined a dish at dinner, and suddenly every menu was screened in advance. That she'd studied French literature before linguistics, and books began appearing in her apartment, Césaire and Condé and Danticat, writers who understood exile and fracture and history. "You're far too intelligent to have been just a translator," he said one evening in the car between events, city lights sliding along the tinted glass. "What actually brought you to Korea in the first place?" "Graduate scholarship. Yonsei University Linguistics Program." "And you stayed because?" "Because the scholarship collapsed after a year but the debt didn't. Because work in Haiti with an unfinished graduate degree was nearly impossible. Because her sister died in a clinic that ran out of blood and someone had to send money home for those children. Because life was a chain of trade-offs, and Korea had been the least brutal option for a broke 25-year-old with languages and nowhere else to go. Opportunity, she said instead. The lie easy, well rehearsed. He watched her in the low interior light, and she felt the weight of his gaze like pressure against her skin. You're a terrible liar, Azali. Truly terrible. Which is oddly refreshing. I'm surrounded by people who lie elegantly, professionally, beautifully. Your honesty is useful to me. The car moved through traffic, past neighborhoods she once knew, past the cramped studio in Nawanggu she'd shared with 2 other foreign workers, past the cheap restaurants where she'd learned how to stretch a budget, past the life she'd lived before 6 words slipped through a cracked door. Her phone weighed heavy in her purse, the new one Tae-gyum had given her on the second day. Far better than the old model. You need dependable communication in this role. Sleek and costly, and wrong in her hand. She'd tried calling her best friend in Port-au-Prince that morning. The call hadn't gone through, just died quietly. Tried her mother next, same result. Only local Korean numbers connected, plus a narrow list of international codes, mostly European embassies and diplomatic contacts. The phone wasn't a gift. It was a leash with carefully chosen slack, surveillance wrapped in generosity. On the 9th day, something changed. There was a gala, one of those enormous glittering fundraisers where tickets began at 5 million won, and Korea's elite assembled to be seen endorsing the correct future. Azali wore a dress that had materialized in her closet, deep sapphire silk that fit perfectly despite her never giving measurements, and the assumption behind that made her skin itch. How long had this been arranged? How thoroughly had her life been catalogued? The ballroom overflowed with chandeliers and champagne, women in gowns priced above cars, men in suits worth more than her family earned in a year. Azali worked the foreign donors, translating their elegantly phrased policy questions that were really inquiries about access and favors. 3 years had trained her to listen between languages, to hear what wasn't being said. She was translating for a German industrialist something dull about manufacturing tax incentives when she felt it, that sharp awareness of attention. She turned and met the gaze of a man across the room, mid-30s, sharply dressed in something Korean tailored with Western lines, a face handsome in a severe way, all angles and focus, like arithmetic given skin. He watched her openly, and when their eyes met, he didn't glance away or feign distraction. He smiled faintly and walked toward her with intention. Vous parlez français? He asked when he reached her, after the German drifted toward the bar. French, her first language, learned in her mother's kitchen and her sister's room, the language of home and safety, and a version of herself that existed before any of this. Oui, she said, and felt something in her chest ease, just a little. Thank God. My French is infinitely better than my Creole, though I assume you speak both. Most educated Haitians are functionally trilingual at minimum. His French carried a Geneva accent, crisp and faintly formal. I'm Baek Jin-wook, prosecutor with the Seoul Central District Office. And you're the interpreter everyone's been talking about. People talk about interpreters? When someone jumps straight from the general translation pool into a presidential candidate's inner circle, yes, quite a lot. Congratulations on the promotion, by the way. A rather meteoric rise. It does make one curious what a person has to do to get that close to Shim Tae-gyum. His staff turnover is famously low. Very loyal team. Or very frightened team. Sometimes, those look the same. There was a blade under the politeness. A suggestion that he believed the second option, as Elie's eyes flicked instinctively around the room, searching for Tae-gyum, for Yojun, for anyone watching, and filing this exchange away as dangerous. "I do my job well," she said, choosing each word. "I don't doubt it. Impeccable, from what I hear." Jin-wook took a flute of champagne from a passing waiter and offered her one. She accepted, grateful for something to anchor her trembling hands. "I've been looking into connections between certain construction firms and campaign financing. Tedious work, mostly spreadsheets and corporate shells. But there was a journalist, Rebecca Chen. She was following similar threads before her unfortunate accident. You knew her, didn't you? I've seen footage of you interpreting at one of her press conferences." Every muscle in Azali's body went rigid, the instinct to run flaring uselessly while her feet stayed rooted. "I interpret for many journalists. It's part of the work. And before we go on, let me say this. If you're still here 47 minutes in, you didn't stumble into this story. You chose it. You stayed because something about Azali's choices, her fear, her refusal to disappear, meant something to you. Stories like this survive because listeners help them travel. If it meant something to you, a like, a comment, or a subscription helps it reach others who understand what it means to be trapped by power and still choose yourself anyway. So if this story mattered to you, mark it, subscribe, like the video. Leave a comment about the moment that stayed with you, not for me, but so this story doesn't end here. All right, back to Azali. Of course, occupational necessity, Jin-wook went on, eyes sharp and intent, as if he were reading, meaning she hadn't meant to reveal. A terrible tragedy. That accident. Hit and run, no driver found. Very clean. Very convenient timing, too, just as her investigation was supposedly hitting something important. She'd formally requested interviews with several senior campaign staff 3 days before she died. But I'm sure that's just coincidence. I have this professional flaw of not believing in convenient coincidences. He was a prosecutor investigating the journalist's death, standing in front of her, speaking to the woman who knew with absolute certainty it hadn't been an accident, and this was either rescue or a far subtler trap, and Azali's mind couldn't decide fast enough which one it was. Before she could assemble a reply that didn't feel like a signed death wish, a hand came to rest on her lower back with quiet, practiced ownership. "Prosecutor Baek." Tae-gyum's voice was easy, almost genial, threaded with something that made the fine hairs along Azali's neck prickle. "I see you've met my interpreter. Azali is indispensable to me, truly. I'm not entirely sure how I functioned before she joined our team." The hand at her back wasn't rough, wasn't improper by any standard that could be challenged in daylight, but it was intimate in a way that made her skin itch. "Mine," the gesture said plainly, to Jin-wook, and to anyone observant enough to notice, "Whatever conclusions you're drawing, she's under my care." Jin-wook's gaze followed the movement, paused where Tae-gyum's fingers pressed into blue silk, and something crossed his face too fast to name. Recognition, perhaps, or revulsion, or a bleak kind of clarity. "Mr. Shim, congratulations on your polling numbers. Remarkable momentum. Though I will say, some of your principal donors have remarkably interesting histories. We should sit down for coffee sometime. Compare thoughts on campaign finance reform, transparency and political funding, things of that nature. I'm sure my donors value your thoroughness. Transparency in politics is vital. I couldn't agree more. It's a central pillar of my platform." Tae-gyum smiled pleasantly, conversational as ever, though Azali felt his fingers tighten by a fraction along her spine. "Of course, investigations sometimes take on a life of their own. Begin to mistake coincidence for design. Patterns for intent. The Chen accident, for example. A horrible loss. Truly devastating. But the police inquiry was exhaustive. Some events are simply accidents. Disorder intruding on an orderly world. Sometimes, Jinwook said, though his eyes betrayed no belief at all. He looked straight at Azali, held her there a beat too long. It was genuinely a pleasure meeting you. I do hope we'll have another chance to speak, perhaps somewhere quieter. My office is always eager to hear from people with close access to political campaigns. She's extremely busy these days. Taegyum cut in lightly before Azali could respond. The campaign schedule is relentless. I scarcely see my own wife. It's work every waking hour. Still, I'm sure she appreciates your interest. Come, Azali. The Minister of Trade has been requesting an introduction. Something about tariff discussions that require your linguistic finesse. He steered her away, his hand still firm at her back, threading through the crowd of influence and money. But once Jinwook was no longer within sight, once they reached a quieter pocket near the bar, Taegyum leaned in close enough that she felt his breath brush her ear. Prosecutor Baek is, by all accounts, a good man. Honest, principled, incurably upright. All the traits that make for an exemplary public servant and a profoundly inconvenient adversary. I need you to keep your distance from him, Azali. He approached me. I didn't seek him out. And yet you spoke French with him, smiled, responded, engaged. His tone stayed smooth, light enough to pass for fond amusement, but the blade beneath it was sharp. Don't imagine I missed any of it. I don't police your conversations. I'm not some petty tyrant. I have no interest in that sort of smallness. But I do expect loyalty from those I've invested in. And be very clear. My investment in you is considerable. Your apartment, your salary, your visa, your family's continued solvency. None of that is incidental. The remainder of the gala dissolved into a smear of faces, accents, staged laughter. Azali smiled on cue, translated on instinct, moved through her assignments with clockwork efficiency. Still, she kept spotting Jinwook across the room, and each time their eyes collided, she felt it. A tug, a pressure change. The ghost shape of a door she hadn't realized was hidden inside her locked cage. A prosecutor who distrusted neat explanations. A prosecutor who spoke French and met her gaze as if she were a person with choices, not an asset requiring management. A prosecutor who might, if she were reckless enough, or desperate enough, or simply tired enough, stand for something she'd stopped allowing herself to imagine. An exit. At midnight, Taegyum's driver deposited her at the apartment that technically bore her name, paid for in quiet atrocities and contractual silence. She rode the elevator to the 22nd floor, unlocked the door with a key that felt borrowed, stepped into elegance that pressed like velvet restraints, and finally let the weight descend. She was owned, acquired, every chair a rung, every surface a boundary, every gift another clasp closed tight, generosity with terms, kindness with teeth. But somewhere in Seoul, a prosecutor was asking questions that frightened the right people. Somewhere existed the idea of truth, of justice, of escape. Somewhere was a man who had looked at her and seen a human being, not a thing to be kept. What would you do, standing in Azali's gilded cell? Keep quiet, accept the comfort, shield your family at any cost? Or burn it all down? Call the prosecutor? Wager your life on the mere possibility of freedom? I honestly want to know what survival means when every option is a loss. Leave your answer below. Tell me your choice. Let's talk. The thing about a beautiful cage is that, over time, your eyes adjust. The bars blur. And Azali had almost talked herself into believing this was survivable, that she could perform the role forever, smile, and translate, and pretend she didn't feel the constant gravity of Taegyum's attention. Until the morning he walked into her apartment without warning. She was in the kitchen, hair damp from the shower, wearing an old t-shirt and shorts, coffee halfway through brewing, And suddenly, he was there, standing in her living room like it belonged to him. Which, in a way, it did. He had a key. Of course he had a key. "You weren't answering your phone," he said mildly, his gaze sweeping over her in a way that made her suddenly aware she wasn't wearing a bra. "I was worried." "It's 6:30 in the morning." I was in the shower. She folded her arms across her chest. "How did you get in here?" "I own the building, Azili." "Well, technically, a subsidiary of a holding company I control owns it. But that's just semantics." He drifted farther inside, perfectly comfortable, as though this were routine. "We have a breakfast meeting with the Japanese trade delegation at 8. I wanted to be sure you were ready." "You could have called." "I did. 7 times. He lifted her phone from the counter, the one he'd given her, and held it up. "You turned it off. Why?" "Because she'd needed one night. Just one. A night without tracking, without eyes. Because she'd met Jin Wook yesterday in a bookstore, accidentally on purpose, and they'd spent 2 hours talking about anything but murder or politics, and she'd shut the phone off so no one could follow her. And apparently that had been unforgivable. The battery died," she said. "Don't." His voice stayed gentle, but something sharp passed behind his eyes. "Don't lie to me, Azali. I've been patient, generous, understanding, but honesty is the one thing I require. Where were you yesterday between 3 and 7? Her heart slammed against her ribs. "I went to a bookstore, walked around Hongdae, had dinner. I'm allowed a life outside work." "Of course. I'm not a monster." He placed the phone down carefully. "But when my head of security tells me you were seen with Prosecutor Bake, sitting close, talking for hours, laughing, I start wondering whether you grasp how fragile your situation is." He was there. We spoke briefly. It meant nothing. 2 hours isn't brief. Taegyom stepped closer. She retreated until the counter stopped her. "And the way you looked at him meant something. I know that look, Azili. I've spent months studying your face. You're watching me constantly." "Yes, no denial, no embarrassment. Because you matter. Because I'm falling in love with you. And I need to know you're safe, loyal, and not about to do something catastrophically foolish, like trust a prosecutor who sees you as evidence, not a person." The words landed like explosives. "Falling in love with you," delivered calmly, as if it were obvious, inevitable. "You don't love me," she whispered. "You can't love someone you control." "Can't I?" He brushed a damp strand of hair behind her ear, almost tender. "I think about you constantly. I reshape my days around you. I lie awake wondering if you're comfortable, if you're happy, if you think about me even a fraction as often as I think about you. That feels like love." "That's obsession." "Maybe they overlap." His hand lingered at her cheek. "I know you're drawn to the prosecutor. Young, righteous, that austere kind of handsome. He probably makes you believe you could be rescued, like you're the heroine of your own story. But he wants one thing, your testimony. Once he has it once, I'm destroyed, what happens to you?" He moves on. "You're sent back to Haiti when no one sponsors your visa. And you're better? You're trapping me so I won't expose you for murder." "No." His thumb grazed her lower lip, and her breath betrayed her. "I'm offering you a life. A real one. Marry me, Azili. After the election, I'll divorce Haewon. The marriage is already dead. We can leave Korea if you want. Anywhere. I have money, reach, influence. We could build something real. You're married. You're a murderer. You're—" Her hands shook. "Delusional, if you think I would ever." He kissed her. Just leaned in and pressed his mouth to hers, soft at first, then deeper when she didn't pull away, couldn't pull away, frozen by shock and fear, and the traitorous flicker of her body responding to his warmth. She shoved him hard. "Get out, Azali. Get out of my apartment, or I will scream until your security comes running, and then I'll tell them exactly who you are." He studied her. Unreadable. She couldn't tell if he was angry, wounded, or simply recalculating. Then he adjusted his tie, smoothed his jacket, slipped back into the politician. The car arrives at 7:30. Wear the gray suit, it photographs well with the delegation's colors. And Azali? He paused at the door. Stay away from Prosecutor Beck. This is the last time I'll ask politely. When the door closed, Azali slid down the cabinet to the floor, shaking so hard her teeth clicked. He had kissed her, proposed, threatened her. 5 minutes, total. And the worst part, the unforgivable part, was that for one fractured second, when his mouth touched hers, she hadn't hated it. She called Jin Wook from the old phone she'd hidden in her bedroom, the one she kept charged in secret because some quiet instinct had warned her she'd need a lifeline Tae-gyom couldn't touch. I need to see you, she said when he picked up. Today, somewhere safe. They met in a hotel room, his suggestion anonymous. Mid-range, the kind in Gangnam where business travelers pass through unnoticed. Jin Wook was already there, pacing, and the moment he saw her, his face shifted, concern cutting through his composure. What happened? You sounded scared on the phone. He came to my apartment this morning. Just walked in. He knows I've been talking to you. The words spilled. He has people following me, tracking me. He knows everything, and she stopped, the rest catching in her throat. Did he hurt you? Jin Wook's voice dropped, tight and dangerous. No, yes, not physically, but she hugged herself. He said he's in love with me, asked me to marry him, then warned me to stay away from you. Jesus. Jin Wook dragged a hand through his hair. Okay. This is moving faster than I expected. We need to act now. Get you out. Get you somewhere secure. There is nowhere secure. He owns my building, controls my visa, my salary, everything, and my family. Jin Wook. If I run, if I make one wrong move, my mother and those kids, I can protect them. I have contacts, emergency visas, relocation, whatever it takes. But you cannot stay near him, Azali. He's unraveling. She laughed, brittle and sharp. You think I don't see that? You think I haven't noticed the man who ordered a death is now writing me love notes and showing up in my apartment and looking at me like I'm property? Jin Wook stepped closer and took her hands. His touch was nothing like Tae-gyom's, gentle, careful, asking instead of claiming. Then help me end this. Wear a wire. Get him to talk again on record. I can arrest him within hours. Once he's in custody, you're free. Free to be deported. Free to testify for protected status. Free to build a life that isn't made of fear and leverage. He tightened his grip slightly. I know you're terrified. I know this feels impossible, but I meant it. I will protect you, no matter what. Why? She searched his face, this prosecutor, with his certainty and quiet intensity. Why do you care this much? Is it really just the case? Something cracked, barely visible, but real. At first, yes, you were evidence, a witness, a path forward. He hesitated, wrestling himself. But spending time with you, talking to you, watching how you endure things no one should have to, with intelligence and restraint, it stopped being just about the case. What are you saying? I'm saying I have feelings I shouldn't. I'm saying every time I see him touch you, see you smile for cameras while breaking inside, I want to burn his campaign to ash. I need your testimony, yes, but I also need you safe, free, able to choose your own life. He was close now, close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough that when she rose onto her toes and kissed him, it required no effort at all. This kiss was nothing like Tae-gyom's measured possession. This was messy and urgent and tasted like possibility, like maybe salvation wasn't a childish fantasy after all. Jin Wook's hands lifted to her face, careful, almost reverent, and when they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing too fast. I'll wear the wire, she murmured against his mouth. I'll get you what you need. Tomorrow, he said. There's a private dinner, just you, him, and his chief of staff. I have the details. Wear it then. Get him talking about the journalist, about the cover-up. That's enough. But they still had today this sliver of time stolen from surveillance, control, and impossible decisions. When Jin-wook kissed her again, slower now, she let herself sink into it, let herself pretend for a few hours that she was just a woman with a man who wanted her for the right reasons instead of the wrong ones. They made love in that anonymous hotel room with afternoon light slipping through cheap curtains, tender and frantic and achingly human, like reclaiming pieces of herself she thought were gone. Afterwards, curled in his arms, she cried for the first time since the nightmare began, and Jin-wook held her and promised she'd be okay, that they'd survive this, that she'd be safe. She wanted so badly to believe him. Quick pause. If you're still here, this story did its job. Something in it caught you and didn't let go. And stories like this survive because people respond to them. If it stayed with you, let it show. Subscribe if you want more like this. Like the video. Leave a comment about the moment that lingered. Now let's go back. The next evening, Azalea wore the wire taped between her breasts, tiny and advanced and completely invisible beneath her black dress. Jin-wook's tech guy had promised it would catch everything within 20 feet, that she'd be safe. That backup waited outside, ready to move the second they had enough. But when she entered the private dining room in one of Seoul's most exclusive restaurants, it wasn't just Taegyum and Yeojun waiting. Haewon was there too. Taegyum's wife sat at the table in an ice blue dress that likely cost more than a car, perfectly composed. And when Azalea froze in the doorway, Haewon smiled. "Miss Moreau, please sit. We have much to discuss." "I was told this was a campaign dinner," Azalea said carefully, her mind racing. The wire was recording. Jin-wook was listening. This wasn't the plan. "It is, in a way." Haewon gestured toward the empty chair. "My husband has been keeping you very close these past weeks. I thought it was time we all spoke honestly about why." Taegyum's face gave nothing away. Yeojun looked like he might actually be sick. Something was deeply, unmistakably wrong. Azalea sat because standing would draw attention, would betray the way her pulse was skidding out of control, would reveal that this was not the dinner she'd prepared herself for. "My husband believes I'm unaware of his fixation on you," Haewon said lightly, pouring wine as if hosting friends. "He thinks I'm the oblivious wife, distracted by charity boards and society luncheons, too shallow to notice he's fallen in love with his interpreter. But I've known for weeks, Azalea. May I call you Azalea?" Yes, of course." "Good. Because we're about to know each other very well." Haewon took a sip. "You see, my husband has a pattern. Beautiful foreign women, usually Caribbean, usually vulnerable. He becomes attached, controlling, convinces himself it's love. The last one was 3 years ago. Martinique, sweet girl, very gentle. She tried to leave him. The air seemed to thin, like oxygen had been siphoned out of the room." "Haewon," Taegyum warned quietly. "She's wearing a wire, darling. Did you honestly think I wouldn't notice?" Haewon's gaze slid to Azalea's chest. The constant touching, the discreet meetings with Prosecutor Baek, the timing of this dinner. She smiled at Azalea. "Take it off, dear. Let's stop pretending." Azalea felt cold spread through her veins. Jin-wook was listening. His team was nearby. But if she removed the wire, they'd lose everything, and she'd be trapped in a room with people who knew she'd just tried to burn them all down. "I don't know what you mean." "Oh, please." Haewon leaned forward. "I've been married to a practiced liar for 15 years. I recognize the signs." Then her tone shifted. "But here's what you don't understand, Azalea. I'm not your enemy. He is." She pointed at Taegyum. "And I'm offering you an exit that doesn't involve a body bag or a deportation notice. What would you do here? The wire is live, backup is close. But you've been exposed, and now the wife is offering an alliance you don't yet understand. Do you run? Call for help? Listen? Tell me in the comments, because I genuinely want to know how you'd survive this." "What are you offering?" Azalea asked, stalling. praying Jinwook was hearing every word and already moving. The truth and partnership. Haewon opened a folder and slid photographs across the table. Rebecca Chen wasn't just digging into construction safety. She was investigating me, my family's companies. The bribes, the labor abuses, the machinery of exploitation. My husband didn't have her killed to save his campaign. He did it to protect me, because I have enough evidence on him to destroy him 10 times over, and he knows it. Azali stared at the photographs, the spreadsheets, the bank transfers, paper everywhere, proof stacked neatly like bricks. You ordered the hit, she whispered. I did what was required to protect my family's business. Haewon didn't blink. Yo-jun carried it out on my instructions, not my husband's. Taegyom handled the cleanup, as he always does. Her smile was cold and precise. We have what you might call a mutually assured destruction marriage. I guard his secrets. He guards mine. The illusion stays intact. Then why tell me? Because I'm exhausted. Exhausted by this marriage, by his fixations on women he can't possess, by endlessly mopping up blood and scandal. Haewon slid another document across the table. I'm offering you a bargain. You testify that he ordered the journalist's death. I supply evidence that supports that version of events. He goes to prison. You receive immunity and protected status. And I walk away wealthy, divorced, and free to run my company without his political ambitions strangling it. You want me to lie, to frame him for something you did. I want you alive, because the alternative, darling, is that you remain a loose end. Haewon glanced at Taegyom. He's infatuated with you now. That won't last. Obsession rots into resentment. One day you stop being a trophy and start being a problem. She drew a finger slowly across her throat. This is madness. Azali stood. All of you are insane. Sit! Taegyom's voice snapped, sharp enough to cut. You're wearing a wire. Prosecutor Baek is listening. Which means you betrayed me after everything I've given you. Everything I offered. So sit down, and we'll discuss how this ends. I'm leaving. Take one step toward that door, and I'll have you arrested for blackmail and extortion. I have records showing you demanded money for silence. Messages you've never seen, sent from accounts traced to you. I will ruin you and your family. He had to be bluffing, but the absolute calm in his eyes said otherwise. The door flew open, and Jinwook stormed in with 4 officers, weapons raised, and the room shattered into noise. Freeze. Hands where we can see them. Taegyom rose slowly, palms open, smiling. Prosecutor Baek, how dramatic, though not unexpected, considering you're running an illegal investigation with an unregistered informant. That wire she's wearing? Completely inadmissible. No authorization. He tilted his head. I know, because I have friends in your office. We obtained authorization 2 hours ago, Jinwook said, though doubt edged his voice. And we have everything recorded. Your wife confessing. You admitting the cover-up. You have my wife making claims any competent attorney will shred. You have nothing that survives a courtroom. Taegyom looked at Azali, and something raw crossed his face. Anger, hurt, something close to grief. And you, I loved you. I would have given you everything. You wanted to own me. That isn't love. Isn't it? He laughed softly. We'll never know. But understand this. Azali, you've destroyed your life for a prosecutor using you, for a case that will collapse. I'll walk free within hours. You'll be deported within days. Tell me, was it worth it? Jinwook grabbed Azali's arm, already pulling her toward the door. Get her out of here. Protective custody, now. The next 48 hours dissolved into safe houses, depositions, and lawyers arguing behind doors Azali was never allowed to open. Jinwook had been right about one thing. Taegyom's lawyers were ruthless. The wire recording was being attacked on technicalities, and Haewon had withdrawn her entire confession, claiming coercion. It was unraveling. We need more, Jinwook told her on day 3, eyes rimmed red, voice stripped raw. Yeojun won't flip without guarantees we cannot give. Haewon's walking because we cannot disprove coercion. And Taegyom's team is shredding the recordings. We need physical proof. Another witness. Anything solid. I gave you everything I had. I know you did. He held her hands like an anchor. And I will get you out of this, I swear. Protected status. A new identity if it comes to that. Whatever it takes. What about my family? The hesitation said enough. We're working on it. You promised you could protect them. I'm trying, Azali. The system is messier than I expected. The timelines are slower. The red tape is choking everything. She pulled free. You promised. You said whatever it takes. And now my mother and those kids are still in Haiti, exposed, while I have painted a target on my back for one of Korea's most powerful men? It's only been 3 days. 3 days for him to make calls, pull favors, send people. Her hands shook, the fear she had buried clawing up her throat. You used me, same as he did. Different language, nicer smile, still used me. That's not fair. Isn't it? You needed a witness. You found a desperate woman. You dressed it up as justice. And now that it is ugly, you are discovering your limits. I have feelings for you. Real ones. Do you? Or do you love the idea of me? The righteous prosecutor saving the helpless foreign woman, a story neat enough to justify everything. She reached for her jacket. I need air. You can't leave. It's dangerous. Then I will be in danger, because I cannot breathe in here anymore. She left him frozen and stepped into Seoul's night, and for the first time in weeks, no one tracked her. No one directed her steps, and the freedom felt terrifying instead of kind. Her phone rang, the old one she had kept hidden, unknown number. Hello? Azali, it's Yeojun. His voice cracked. Do not return to the safe house. He knows the location. He is planning something. I cannot. Just do not go back. What is he planning? I cannot say. They are listening. But please, I am sorry. I am so sorry. The journalist. It happened during an argument. But Haewon told me to finish it, and I was weak, and now you are trapped, and I cannot. He sobbed. I have proof. Real proof. Transfers. Recordings. Everything. I have documented it for years, because I knew I would need it. Meet me tomorrow. Namsan Tower. Noon. I will give you everything. But tell Prosecutor Beck to grant full immunity or I disappear and the evidence disappears with me. The call ended. Azali stood on the sidewalk, trying to absorb what had just landed in her lap, a possible escape or a carefully laid snare, and she realized she no longer trusted herself to know which one it was. Let me pause here for a moment. If you're still listening, it's because something in this story caught you. Maybe it was Azali's fear, or the way she kept choosing herself even when every option was wrong. Stories like this don't spread on their own. They move because people decide they're worth carrying forward. A like, a comment, a subscription is what keeps them alive long enough to reach someone else who needs to hear it. So if this story stayed with you, say so. Subscribe, like the video, leave a comment about the moment that lingered, not as a favor, but as a way of letting the story keep going. Now, back to Azali. From a tactical perspective, the meeting at Namsan Tower was Jin-wook's personal nightmare. Public space, heavy tourist presence, countless ways for Yeojun to vanish or for Taegyom's people to intervene. But there was no alternative. Yeojun had the evidence, and he had set the rules. Azali demanded to attend, despite Jin-wook's objections. He will trust me more than you. I am the other life he ruined. Let me handle this. They came separately, Jin-wook, with plainclothes officers scattered through the area, Azali alone and exposed, both lure and negotiator. Yeojun stood at the observation deck, staring out over Seoul, and when she reached him, he did not turn. I never wanted this, he said softly. I was meant to frighten her, the the journalist. Just enough to make her stop digging. To understand, some stories cost lives. She resisted. She fell. And I panicked. Haewon told me to erase the problem, and I did it because I was scared and foolish. You murdered her. Yes. No defense. No excuses. And I have been paying for it every day since. Watching Taegyum fixate on you. Watching the pattern repeat. Knowing it would end the way it did with the woman from Martinique. What happened to her? She tried to leave. Told Taegyum she was returning to Martinique. Did not want his money or a ring. Only freedom. He persuaded her to share one last dinner. Intimate. Sentimental. His version of closure. Yeojun finally faced her, eyes hollow. They found her 3 days later. Overdose. Alcohol and pills. Suicide, the report said. But Taegyum was the last to see her alive, and the staff said she looked radiant that night. You think he killed her? I think he loved her, and refused to lose her, and chose control instead. The same choice he will make with you when desire rots into something darker. He held out a USB drive. It is all here. 5 years of leverage. Recordings, transfers, emails, everything showing Haewon ordered the murder, and Taegyum buried it. Enough to lock them away, for life. Why help me now? Because you remind me of my daughter. The same age, the same way you hold yourself upright, even when fear is eating you alive. The same stubborn belief that things can still turn out right. His voice broke. She died 2 years ago. Cancer. And I keep thinking, if she had lived, if she had ended up where you are, alone and hunted, I would pray someone helped her, someone brave enough to act. So this is me being brave, once, before it is too late. He placed the drive in her palm. Full immunity, witness protection, a new name. That is the cost. And leave this country, Azeli. Korea has already taken enough from you. Jin-wook surfaced with his team moments later, and Yeojun did not flee or struggle. He simply offered his wrists for the cuffs and allowed himself to be taken, while Azeli stood holding proof capable of destroying 2 powerful lives and resurrecting no one already buried. It took 6 months to build the case. Yeojun's files were brutal, undeniable, the sort of evidence that dismantled every defense strategy line by line. Haewon fell first, arrested as her family's empire collapsed in public view. Taegyum resisted until the final hour, his attorneys filing endless motions, but recordings of him coordinating the cover-up with Yeojun sealed his fate. Azeli testified behind closed doors, her name sealed, and Taegyum watched her throughout, with eyes that had once burned with fixation and now reflected only ruin. I loved you, he said during a brief moment, before she stepped down, his lawyer absent. That part was real. Whatever else you think of me, believe that. You loved possessing me, she replied. That is not the same thing. Is it not? He smiled, hollow and aching. Perhaps you will spend your life beside Prosecutor Baek trying to answer that. I hope he makes you happy. I hope he gives you what I could not. I hope... His voice sank, nearly soundless. You think of me someday, and wonder if we might have been kinder people somewhere else. We could not have. You ended lives, and I do not excuse that. No, you endure. That was always what I admired most. Security escorted him away, and Azeli never saw Shim Taegyum again. The media broadcast his sentencing, 25 years for conspiracy and obstruction. His ambitions erased, his name reduced to a warning about power and fixation. Haewon received 18 years. Yeojun, for his testimony and cooperation, received 7 with parole eligibility after 4. Azeli was granted a new visa, protected status, and a prosecutor who kept arriving with coffee, apologies, and quiet admissions that he had failed her, that the case had eclipsed her humanity, but he hoped she might allow him to try again. Did you enjoy this story? Subscribe, like, leave a comment about the moment that triggered you. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that survival is power. See you on the next one.